independent sounds alone are not animate, or at least the modules that you use are dormant music or dormant sounds. I mean, I think there's a vast difference. I think some people, I keep playing the devil's advocate about the music that you produce, but I'm really enjoying listening to it. I think it's very different quality than a lot of electronic music and synthesizer music that I've heard before. I think a lot of the time synthesizer music, as you said before, attempts dexterity or virtuosity without attempting mood and passion within the music or emotion in the music, something that is very human quality. I think I can feel that in your music, that there is that kind of, there's mood and tone and feeling in the music. It's not sterile. It's not doesn't it doesn't feel alien, which a lot of synthesizer music has in the past given me a feeling of alienation, and I think that's not. I haven't felt that with your music at all.
Well, I'm happy to hear that because I am interested in music as being somewhat similar to life, and in that sense it should encompass all the dimensions of life, and certainly the music that I've been nurtured by, so to speak, has been music which is full in that it has an expressive quality which is expressed by technical perfection, which allows the expressive quality of the music to come through. My favorite composers or musicians I guess, would be Bach, first of all, is a favorite of mine, and Gustav Mahler is a favorite.
Mm-hmm. I was just about to, funnily enough, ask you a question. I mean, you said you're influenced by North Indian music, African music, jazz, and rock, and yet you don't mention something that seems so very present in your music. I mean, both classical and contemporary classical music. I mean, it must be a very deep foundation for you, particularly contemporary classical that has a tendency to use the same sorts of, at least, silences and the use of silence as a part of the music. And I mean, you seem to have used that in several pieces. I wonder if you feel like that's an influence or...
Right. I think it's one thing I'm very glad I did is that I had the experience of playing an instrument for a long time. I played the saxophone, and it's important for me that music should breathe in some way. That's kind of a vague expression, but I think part of the secret of attempting to bring music to life is to allow it to breathe, even though in this case it obviously is not breathing. It's a machine, essentially. And speaking of the saxophone, two of my favorite musicians are Charlie Parker and John Coltrane.
Perfect place to be, WKCR.
Right. And
I just want to introduce you again so that the listening audience knows who I'm talking to. I'm speaking with Michael Robinson. He's a composer, and I'm very happy to have him here on the Music Smorgasbord tonight. And he's talking about his music and playing some pieces. You're very lucky to hear them. And once again, I just want to tell you that he is going to be performing, I don't want to say performing, exposing you to the sounds that he plays and his pieces tomorrow at St. Agnes Branch of the New York Public Library. And that's going to be at 6:30 tomorrow at St. Agnes Branch, which is 444 Amsterdam Avenue. And maybe you'd like to play something more now.
Yes, the next piece is titled White Puppy. This piece was composed in 1987. One of my favorite things to do in New York is to go to the museums. And I actually sometimes get musical ideas when I go to a museum. I don't attempt to give some sort of picturesque or literal interpretation of a painting, but sometimes I do get an abstract musical idea after I'm looking at some artwork, and I prefer to give my pieces poetic titles, which really might have nothing at all to do with the content of the music, but except that they may be evocative of something. I happen to be looking at a painting by Renoir at the Metropolitan Museum when I got the idea for this piece. And normally what I had heard about Renoir was that he's most famous for his coloration. And this particular painting I was looking at, Figures by the Sea, I believe is the title of the painting, is structurally, the way it's constructed is just a masterpiece, and the color enhances that, but I was taken by the strength of this painting, the perfect balance it had, as well as the great coloration in it. And in addition to 3 human forms, there was a small white puppy, which was lying on the beach in the sun, and for some reason when I thought of naming this, I thought of that. So I'd like to play that now.
Okay, well, let's listen to that now. And you are tuned to WKCR FM New York. Okay, you'll have to excuse us for that little problem we had. We were having a teeny bit of trouble with our transmitter there. Nothing important. And right now, we're back again with Michael Robinson, and we're talking about his pieces, one of them which you just heard. And you're tuned to WKCR FM New York. This is a special program we like to call the Music Smorgasbord. It's a chance to speak to some of the interesting people and hear some of the music that's going on in the new music arena in New York. And right now, as I said, we are speaking with a composer, Michael Robinson, and he is going to be performing or having some of his pieces played tomorrow at the St. Agnes branch of the New York Public Library at 444 Amsterdam Avenue. And we can ask you a few more questions right now. I know that you say that you went to music school for university. You went to the Crane Music School of SUNY Potsdam. And is that's another performance art campus for the SUNYs, isn't it? Or is it?
Right, it's a separate music school, which is part of the college up there. And they have some fine teachers up there. And I was exposed to a lot of different musical styles there.
But you said before that you were, this was off mic, we were having a conversation, you said that you had to take certain electronic music courses in college that you weren't very interested in. And I was just wondering, it flashed through my mind, what did get you into the computer music and into synthesizer music and into actually composing on the computer?
I guess it was a friend who gave me an article about the concept of doing music with computers and synthesizers, and this article intrigued me, and I looked into it, and I did a lot of research and ended up buying a product which seemed closest to the type of conception that I had, and after experimenting with it, it became my complete involvement with composing.
And you've ceased really using any sort of other kinds of instrumentation? Do you ever, for instance, compose something with the computer and then try and transfer it and have a performing group play it or something like that? Or do you not, I mean, is there the capability within your own framework to use the crossover, to use a performing group, to compose on the computer, to mix them up, to use, say, perhaps a little more like a performance piece, say a John Cage type of performance piece, where he uses, some electronically composed music and other performance piece?
I actually haven't used acoustical instruments since I started with these instruments. It seems the more I use them, the deeper I get into this world, I guess I might call it. Though I like to think that I may want to write for instruments sometime in the future, but right now I'm very involved with exploring this realm of musical expression, because there's something elusive about it, there's something mysterious about it. Like I said before, in the sense that it's inanimate, it's dead, but it can be brought to life. though it's not exactly clear how that's done. And I usually write several pieces in a particular area or style, and then I go on to a different type of piece. And because I get bored, I'm repeating. I could write a million pieces using the same type of techniques which I used in the past, but that's boring for me, so I look for something new, something different. And the timbres of these instruments are extremely limited. Essentially, it can produce 6 simultaneous pitched voices. One of the voices is a bass-type timbre, and the other 5 are a type of hybrid keyboard sound, somewhere between a harpsichord, a piano, and an organ. And it can also produce 7 simultaneous percussion sounds. But
aren't there other modules? I've heard of, for instance, I know that there's a drummer called Ronald Shannon Jackson, and he performs a lot, and he's also very interested in computer-generated sound at this point. And he was in Japan not so long ago and received a very interesting piece, an instrument that's actually a synthesizer with a saxophone blow attachment, and different sort of modules of sound can be produced using, and they're manipulated through the air through which you blow. You blow through this piece, manipulates the strength of the sound that you create, and it does have a saxophone fingering, and it's a very interesting thing. It's produced by a company in Japan. I'm not sure the name of the company, but I was thinking about the different ways in which you can manipulate that. That's both the use of the human element, along with synthesized sound.
I am interested in moving on to some other equipment where I have a richer tonal palette to work from. However, I also feel that it's really a wonderful experience to work with an instrument which seems to be very limited at first. I remember 2 years ago I felt that I couldn't do anything else with these instruments. I just had to get new instruments which could, produce, a wide rainbow of different tones, different tone colors. But at the time I was unable to find software which was as excellent as the software that I use, and so I put off getting these new instruments. In the meantime, I made discoveries about music in general and also about these instruments, which I don't think I would have if I had moved on to new instruments. So I think there really is something to be said about not getting too taken away by all the new products which come out, because after all, they really want to make money. That's what they're doing with all these new products. I mean, they're wonderful products, but I think the companies tend to, put out a lot of new products, like every 6 months, and some people may feel pressured to buy them because they feel like they're missing out if they don't have the latest and greatest synthesizer. However, I really think the music itself is more important than the instrument you use for the music. It's I think ideally I think of the instruments I use as being invisible and not even there. The instruments are just a means for expressing your own musical ideas, and if it reaches the point where the instrument is more important than the music, I think maybe you're avoiding something and not really listening to what you're doing.
It's true. You were saying that you compose pieces in different modes and with different attitudes. I'm not exactly sure what you were trying to express by that, but you were saying that you've composed a group of pieces in a similar sort of mode, and then that you tend to like to move on quickly to a different style, a different feeling in your pieces.
Right. I like to move on at the right time. I don't sometimes I'm reluctant to leave a certain area. This next piece that I'm going to play is titled pictures on the wall. And this piece, as you'll hear, is obviously quite different from the other pieces I've played so far. I think they inhabit a world which is colored by rhythm and blues and by jazz. I think that's pretty obvious. And yet there's something different about it. It's not jazz and it's not rhythm and blues. It has something in common with those styles of music. And I actually got the idea for this piece while I was jogging up the sugarcane fields in Hawaii, and I got the idea for the bass line anyway. And when I worked out the piece, I was staying in the home of an artist, and there were lots of paintings on the wall. So when I named it, it came out Pictures on the Wall.
Okay, we are in the studio with Michael Robinson, and he is playing us some of his pieces in a radio concert of his work tonight on WKCR FM New York, 89.9 on your FM dial, the place to hear new music in New York City. And we're going to hear his piece right now. And once again, you're listening to WKCR FM New York, the place to hear new music in the city of New York. We've been carrying the torch of new music for a very long time, and we hope that you do tune in for our new music shows. And I am in the studio with Michael Robinson, who's been playing us his pieces all evening since 10:30, and he's been giving us a treat tonight in the studio. And the hum that you hear in the background is his computer that generates the pieces he's composed on the computer. And it's a very interesting technique that he has. And he'll be performing tomorrow at the St. Agnes branch of the New York Public Library at 6:30. And that's located at 444 Amsterdam Avenue. And he'll be beginning at 6:30. It's a second concert that he's had at the New York Public Library. And you were telling me before you have a few things that you do for visual effect when you're in concert, as well as to alter the sound, so you are performing as well as using the computer to generate the compositions that you've made. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to have a concert of electronic music and how people react to it? You were saying that you had a concert at La Mama La Galleria, and I was wondering how that had gone, and you were describing that, and I think that it would be interesting for the listeners to hear about how electronic music is received in the city and the places you've played.
Well, last spring I was fortunate to be able to present 5 concerts at St. Peter's Church following the concert at La Mama, which I shared with 2 other composers. And I actually prefer having the program to myself because, first of all, I have a lot of material which I like to play, and also I like to be in total control of the environment. I have very excellent sound equipment which I use for my concerts. I apologize, we had a little bit of difficulty here with the patch cord before.
It's altogether my fault, and I should have figured it out earlier. We did have a problem with a weak connection on a patch cord, so unfortunately in the last piece or 2, you didn't get the exact sound that should have been gotten.
There was a little bit of distortion. I believe the left and right channels weren't balanced. They weren't well balanced. However, we got it all straightened out.
And practice makes perfect. The next radio concert you have up here will be much better than this. And
I enjoy, like I said before about the concerts, I enjoy having control of the setting, and I like it to be very dark. Sometimes I light a couple of candles, and while the computer is doing most of the playing of the music, I do sit behind the instruments and control the levels and alter them according to the sound of the particular room I'm working in. And sometimes, as I mentioned before, I alter the timbres of the different voices as I think it's appropriate for that particular concert. I've had mostly very positive responses at the concerts that I've given. They're different from concerts that people have gone to. Most people say that. And I hope to be able to present another series of concerts like I did at St. Peter's Church last spring. My most beneficial presentation of my music, I think, is when I can do it on a weekly basis. And I like having that opportunity to present new pieces as I finish them. And I hope to set something like that up again this year.
Why is that? Is that just instant sense of how they're accepted, or I mean, what does it have to do? Why do you feel you need to have a musical performance every week? Is that something special about it, or you don't want to be composing in the wilderness? Is that sort of the idea?
I just have so much music, and I feel better. Again, talking about the cycle of composing. I don't think a piece is really finished until it's been performed, because of it's written and no one hears it. It's essentially not performed. So I like having a regular opportunity to present my music, and once a week seems to be a pretty good thing, though it could be more, I guess, or less even. But that when I did that last spring for 5 weeks, I enjoyed it very much, and different people came to the concerts, and I had different reactions, and I played different pieces at the different concerts.
Do you ever think of yourself as something other than a composer? Do you think of yourself as perhaps something more combined between composition, musician, performer, inventor? I mean, you are sort of stepping beyond the bounds of, I mean, you're walking into a new realm of music that some people accept, some people don't. And I wonder how you think of it philosophically, I mean.
Well, I honestly believe that, well, for myself anyway, I spent some time playing the saxophone, and my personal point of view is I felt that the jazz world and the classical world, they seemed stagnated. They just didn't seem to be going anywhere, really. And when I was playing saxophone and when I was writing compositions, I was searching, searching for my own voice and writing pieces for traditional instruments or playing the saxophone. And yet I gradually felt more comfortable composing than improvising, because my main involvement with the saxophone was improvising. And I didn't quite feel comfortable writing for instruments. And after I got into the computers, I realized that I think there is something to be said for instruments which reflect the time. In other words, music seems to change with the new instruments which are introduced. Of course, in classical music, the style of piano seemed to change along with the instrument itself changing, from the clavichord that Bach used to the early piano that Mozart used to the piano with a larger sound, the pianoforte that Beethoven used, and going on and on. When new instruments are being introduced, the saxophone was a new instrument, and that became really the main instrument of jazz, where the two really leading exponents of this music were saxophonists, Charlie Parker and John Coltrane. And rock music and I also consider the music of the Beatles to be up on that level with Charlie Parker and John Coltrane and Bach and Mahler. Well, the main instrument of rock music was the guitar, and I think computers are an area which somehow reflect the nature of the times very well, and I think that interesting things can spring from this, which are very relevant.
Well, I think the most important thing that should spring from that computer, at least, is the next piece, and so that people can hear how you're creating on the computer. And can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to play now?
I spent the summer in Hawaii, and I was there for about 10 weeks, and I finished a number of pieces, and a lot of them, about half of the ones I did, have extremely slow tempos and are about 10 to 20 minutes in length. This piece I'm going to do next is titled Green Arabesques, and it has only two voices, a very soft bass voice plus a melodic voice. And the title I took from the arabesques which the trees around me, the palm trees, I guess, created, their leaves intertwining. And I frequently think of the melodies that I write as being arabesques, melodic arabesques, which embroider the main root or underlining bass voice of a piece. So I'd like to play Green Arabesques right now.
You are tuned to WKCR FM New York. It's just about 12:05. And we're going to hear some more of Michael Robinson's music. He's with us in the studio and will be with us until 1 o'clock. In case you're interested in calling us here at WKCR, you can call us at 212-280-5223. Please stay tuned. You are tuned to WKCR FM New York, and we're listening to the music of Michael Robinson. And we're going to also talk to him a little more tonight. It's about 12:20, and you are listening to New Music Smorgasbord, which comes to you every Monday night, and it's our way of sort of getting in touch with the new music world that happens in New York, and also getting a sense of what's going on lately in new music and how we can reach out to the new music and perhaps downtown music scene to bring them a little closer to the listening audience. If you're listening far out in New York or in New Jersey or in Connecticut, we welcome your calls at 212-280-5223 after we've stopped speaking, since we are the only people here in the studio to answer the phones. But we do enjoy listening and listening to the comments of the listeners and hearing from you. So if you do want to call us, 212-280-5223, ask any questions you want, and we'll try and give you an answer. And I'd like to just say hello once again to Michael Robinson and thank him for that piece. That was a particularly soothing piece, I thought. You were saying before you just composed quite a few of these pieces while you were in Hawaii on vacation, or was it actually
I wasn't really on vacation. I was working there.
It was working.
Usually when you say that place, you think of vacation.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
It is a vacation. Things come to mind there. So you were involved in any kind of musical things while you were there, or just...
Well, essentially I was just there to work on some pieces, and I was there for 10 weeks, and I was doing some other non-musical work also, but I did have the opportunity to write quite a few pieces there. Quite a few of them are kind of quiet, like that last one with just two voices, or more than two voices, but the accompanying voices are kind of softly in the background. Did you have a question?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I would like to move now to a piece I wrote in 1986 titled A Danish Princess. And I believe I was just reading something about Denmark while I was writing this piece, about dancers, I think. And that's how I chose that particular title. Technically speaking, this piece is unique among the ones I've written because it actually has some fairly clearly defined tonal centers.
Uh-huh.
3 of them, actually. And the way the melodic voice is orchestrated is somewhat of a pyramid form. It starts off with the melody being played by one voice, and then another voice is added, and another voice is added, and then the voices are taken away gradually. But it isn't quite that...
clear-cut?
Right, it isn't quite that clear-cut. There are exceptions. Sometimes when one voice is playing, I will put all 3 in. And the beginning of this piece actually began with, I was watching some terrible movie late at night on television that took place in Africa, I think. But it had some wonderful African music, and this rhythmic idea, which you'll hear in the piece, is actually extracted from that movie, which I don't recall the title of.
It was so atrocious.
Right, I didn't watch the whole thing. I just got this idea, and then I turned it off.
Okay, well, at least it brought forth some artistic endeavor.
Right.
Yours, nonetheless. I just would like to say once again, we are speaking with Michael Robinson. We're here in the studio at WKCR FM New York. And my name is Samantha Black. I'm not always your host on New Music Smorgasbord. In fact, I can't guarantee you that I can tell you who the next host of New Music Smorgasbord is. It does rotate between the various different new music programmers on WKCR. So it is a potpourri of new music, and we hope that you do enjoy it, and stay tuned for the Transfigured Night, which comes up at 1 o'clock. And Scott McCauley will be bringing you, transfiguring you until about 5 in the morning when we bring you jazz with our Daybreak Express. So let's listen now to the piece that he has for us. Danish Princess, I think, is the name.
Right, that's it.
Okay.
You are listening to WKCR FM in New York, 89.9 FM. This is Elodie Lawton on WKCR FM, where you can hear my music as well as other new music.
You are tuned to WKCR FM New York. My name is Samantha Black, and I'm hosting tonight, actually co-hosting really, with Michael Robinson. He's bringing us a radio concert of his computer music, and we're here in the studio bringing you some more of his music, and he's here to tell you a little bit more about what he's going to play now and what he just played.
The piece we just heard was titled A Danish Princess. The next piece is titled Smokestack. And Smokestack was composed in 1986, and the apartment I live in Manhattan faces the East River, and you can see an enormous Con Edison plant.
Uh-huh.
Fortunately, I just see the 3 smokestacks, and when I first moved into when I first saw the apartment, I thought it was pretty disgusting that I had to look at smokestacks, but actually it's very unusual to see any smoke coming out of them, and they actually seem to paint them. It sounds like I'm doing a commercial for Con Edison, but anyway, they actually seem to paint them occasionally, which is kind of fascinating to see these men up there on these enormous, I don't know how many stories high they are, but they look like ants when they're working on them. And the happy thing about the smokestacks is they actually remind me of the paintings of De Chirico a lot. He uses the smokestacks frequently. And anyway, I guess I wrote this piece pretty shortly after I had moved into the apartment, and the smokestacks seemed to command my attention whenever I looked out the window. And that's where the title for this piece comes from. This piece is actually divided into 11 equal parts in terms of time. And it's like the last piece I played. It's kind of like a pyramid shape. It starts with a little, and it builds up, and then it comes back down again. It's also different from the pieces I've played in that it employs chords or triads, which are actually repeated throughout the piece, though in different forms, so you might not recognize them in certain points.
That sounds fascinating, so I think we should hear it. But just before we go to that, I'd like to once again remind you that you are tuned to WKCR FM, and this is New Music Smorgasbord. I'm with Michael Robinson, a composer who uses a computer that you hear humming in the background, and he's bringing this to you in a live radio concert. And you can give us a call here if you want more information or you'd like to talk to him personally, 212-280-5223. Thank you, and stay tuned. Okay, that was a piece composed and actually performed here with the use of a computer that we have in studio right now. Thanks to Michael Robinson, the composer. He's brought all of his various pieces of equipment up here to bring you, the listeners of WKCR, a special oral treat. And you are listening to this very interesting concert of electronic music as produced by Michael Robinson and his computer. And that piece was called Danish Princess?
Oh, no, that one was called Smokestack. Right, that was one we heard
that's
before.
The one before.
Right, they both pieces have a similar type, pyramid-type structure. The next piece I'd like to play is titled Cameroon. And I got the original rhythmic idea for this piece, and it was that rhythmic idea that I built the piece around from a piece of African sculpture from the country of Cameroon at the Metropolitan Museum. It was actually a statue of a dancing king, I believe. And it's one of my favorite pieces, actually. It has kind of a very unusual type sound to it.
And it uses how many voices? Does it have many voices, or is it mostly percussive?
Well, there's a percussion figure, which is repeated, an ostinato. Then there's a bass ostinato, and also a melodic ostinato played by several voices in descending octaves. And then on top of that are what I like to think of as melodic arabesques. And they start off being played by one voice, then two, and then three voices. And it's a rather short piece, about 5 minutes long.
Okay, well, you are tuned to WKCR FM New York. My name is Samantha Black, and you're listening to New Music Smorgasbord. Once again, I have to encourage you. We've had several very nice calls, and for those of you who haven't given us a call, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about electronic music or a little bit more about Michael Robinson himself or where he's performing, which I want to remind you is tomorrow at the St. Agnes branch of the New York Public Library. That's 444 Amsterdam Avenue. And he's going to be performing there tomorrow. That's Tuesday at 6:30. And you'll be able to see the whole setup, which is fascinating. I've been able to watch it for the last 2 hours or so. And you'll be able to see the whole setup as well as hear some of the pieces. And I'm sure since he's composed over 80, you'll be able to hear very different pieces than we have been hearing in the studio. So with that, on that note, let's listen to this piece called Cameroon.
Right.
Okay, and the movement that you're hearing in the background is loading and unloading of different pieces. It really does happen before your eyes. I wish people could see this, and you do have the possibility of seeing this. Michael Robinson will be there with his computer and his compositions tomorrow at the St. Agnes branch of the New York Public Library, using the computer to perform his pieces, and you'll be able to see what kind of technique he uses, and you'll even see him loading and unloading his pieces. And he has a small thing to say about that last piece you heard.
Well, that was Cameroon, which was influenced by the idea came from looking at a piece of African sculpture. The final piece I'd like to play is titled Trembling Flowers, and I would like to dedicate this piece to Inga and Dorothy. And Trembling Flowers is one of my favorite pieces. It was written in 1985, and I see it as an affirmative piece. Quite a lot of sound in it, as you'll hear, and it only has 3 voices, but as I mentioned before, the computer is capable of performing extraordinary technical feats, and in this particular piece I thought it was appropriate to have it display some of its capabilities in terms of virtuosity. So this last piece is titled Trembling Flowers, and again we'd like to dedicate this to Inga and Dorothy.
Okay, and you are tuned to WKCR FM New York, and before we hear this last piece, I'd like to thank Michael Robinson for coming into the studio, and we'll be talking to him for a little bit more before Scott McCauley comes in to do his Transfigured Night. So please stay tuned, and I hope that you're enjoying the show. What we're doing now is giving you a little extra. It's just about 1 when we're supposed to end the New Music Smorgasbord, but we decided to give you another extra special piece, some more music from Michael Robinson, another taste of what he's up to and what he does. And I'd just like to encourage you all to go see and feel and hear what's going on with his music tomorrow at the St. Agnes branch of the New York Public Library. That's going to be starting at 6:30, and that's tomorrow at the New York Public Library branch of St. Agnes, and that's at 444 Amsterdam Avenue. And that's definitely something that shouldn't be missed. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Michael Robinson for coming up and bringing all of his equipment and really bringing us a special thing at KCR, a radio concert of this music. Thank you.
Thank you. I've enjoyed being here with you tonight very much. The piece I'd like to play now is titled Black Pearl, and it was composed in late 1987. And I think that the structure of this piece has something of the influence of John Coltrane, who's one of my favorite musicians.
Well, that's something that we just happened to celebrate his birthday. It didn't happen. His birthday came up, and we celebrated it the 22nd of September. And for those of you who tuned in, we hope you enjoyed that incredible birthday broadcast. And we're bringing you a lot more this month on WKCR. Actually, lots of interesting things are going to go on. A little later in the month, very soon, actually, will be the Clifford Brown birthday broadcast. But before that, we'll be bringing you the music of, not before that, after that we'll be bringing you the music of Art Blakey and Thelonious Monk in October. And actually a lot more coming your way on WKCR FM New York, 89.9 on your FM dial. My name's Samantha Black. I do a few other shows on the station, and I'm also the station manager, so I have a lot to do with what goes on around here. And in case you have any questions or things you want to know about the station, you can always call me during the day, 212-280-5223. Leave me a message and I'll try and get back to you. Or just give us a call right now and we'll be able to talk to you towards the end of the show. So we're finishing up now with another composition by Michael Robinson.
Black Pearl.
Okay.
Right.